My name is Jess Servion, and I'm super excited to bring you my new podcast, The Juice with Jess. This podcast is going to be about everything in your customer's journey. We're talking acquisition, awareness, making that purchase, retaining that customer, bringing them back around, and everything in between. This is going to be all about delivering dope brand experiences and talking to some really amazing people who are in the customer experience space, the marketing space, and everything in between. My friends, welcome back to another episode of The Juice with Jess Servion. I am super excited about this week's guest. It's one of my dearest friends in the CX space, Cati. Last name used to be Pashal, but now it is no longer. She will say her married last name, but she is one of the CX leaders from Glossier. Cati, introduce yourself. Tell the crowd your new last name.
Hello, the crowd. I'm Cati Brunel Brotman. She has a hyphen now. Did I take my husband's last name because it has a hyphen and that sounds fancier?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I am a CX leader at Glossier. Previously have worked at Daily Harvest, at Birchbox, at Headway, and have really been in the CX space for about the last 6 or 7 years in the startup world, kind of growing teams and starting with companies that are a little bit smaller and helping them grow and scale and do good work.
Yes. I'm super excited to bring Cati on. Cati and I actually go way back. So before I was ever in the D2C space and Feastables and any of the e-com brands that I worked for in the past, or, fractionally worked for, Cati and I met when I was a CX leader in a cybersecurity company. I forget how we met.
I also was trying to think about this the other day, and I was like, how did Jess and I meet? I just feel like we've always been in each other's LinkedIn messages, being like, should we have a call?
Yeah, and sometimes she ghosts me, but I get it because wedding planning takes your life away. But Cati and I have known each other for a really long time, and she's just a really awesome person. Honestly, you mentored me. Because you were one of the people that helped me move from B2B to B2C. And I'm just super stoked for you to be on. So this week we're going to talk about her time at Glossier, mentoring, and anything in between. So I want to kick it off. So you've worked in the CX space pretty much since the start of your fucking career at this point, right?
Yeah.
But what drew you to CX?
Ooh, okay. So I had a slightly circuitous route to CX because I was a theater major and got an undergrad degree and a master's in theater and was working as a professional stage manager, events manager in New York, living my absolute theater dreams, hit my mid-20s and realized that I really wanted health insurance and a steady paycheck, and kind of pivoted into CX agent work because it was really flexible. I could do it from home, and it's kind of the same job. When you're stage managing, when you're doing event management, you're communicating with people cross-functionally, you are solving problems, you're kind of thinking on your feet, you're handling crises. And so going from stage management into CX management was such a natural thing for me because it was all the same skills, but it had a little bit more security. And I also really love the startup space because it's always changing. It's always growing. You never know what's going to happen. I could come into work one day and be like, I don't have that many meetings today. And then, a discount code will leak online, or a policy will change, or somebody will come out with an article about you. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. Now we have to handle this thing. What are we going to do? How am I going to communicate? What is the best way to communicate this to my team, to come up with a process? So that is really energizing for me.
Yeah, I love that. I think you hit on a good point about startup space. We're going to get there. We'll definitely get there. We'll just get there now. What's really interesting is that I also started my career in CX but less startup. It was actually corporate America, right?
Yeah.
It was corporate America. I was doing a lot of account management, and it was really dope. And then moved into the startup space, right? And I personally really love startups because you get to wear so many hats and you get to do these things and learn all the things. And that's the beauty of CX, too, right? But you kind of burn out sometimes.
You definitely burn out sometimes.
And so I'm actually curious, what do you do to avoid burnout?
So one of my favorite things to talk about is actually like mental health in the startup and CX space, because I think people don't really think about it as emotional labor, but that's what it is. You have to, meet customers where they're at, meet collaborators where they're at, and sometimes where they're at is they are just screaming at you because they need somebody to scream at, and it doesn't feel great. And I think as well in the startup space, like you said, you're wearing so many hats, you're trying to solve so many problems that there is really a mentality of like, you're going to set yourself on fire to keep everybody warm.
Yeah.
And the first thing that you have to do is realize that about yourself. And I'm still working on this, talk about it in therapy all the time, is like setting boundaries.
Therapy.
And therapy's so good, everybody should do it. That's my hot tip for being a person in the world.
I know.
But really figuring out how much are you willing to put of yourself out there. What do you consider an emergency? And like, that's something conversations that I have with collaborators and managers of like, let's define what an emergency is. Because like, if there's an emergency, if the website crashes and it's a Saturday, like call me, I'll hop online. But if it's not an emergency, like it's totally fine to be like, yep, seen this, I will handle it on Monday. This does not need my time right now.
Yeah.
It is not an emergency. And I think as well, being a people manager, you're really setting the example for your team from the top down. So like if I don't take all my PTO, no matter how many times I tell my team, take your PTO, they're subconsciously going to see me not doing it and be like, oh, should I not take my PTO? In order to advance in my career, should I do what my boss is doing and not take my PTO?
Don't be the millennial.
Don't do it.
Us millennials. Like, please do be this us millennials. Girl, I think you like actually hit the nail on the head, because it leads to like one of the things I was going to ask you is like, as CX leaders, it's like, we're always like, oh, okay, like go do this, like don't be us. Like I know me as a leader, like when I'm leading like some of my fractional teams, they'll come to me for advice and I'm like, no, like have your boundaries, do these things. But then here I am in Italy, like on my vacation, like still online. I'm available for you all the time,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And like, so, I mean, you hit the nail on the head though. It's like, you're kind of saying like, okay, don't be like me, like all this stuff, right? But like, let's dive into that a little bit further. Like as a CX leader, like, besides burnout, how do you distinguish between do this, like not do this, like I'm not demanding anything from you, but like, how do you inspire people to do things differently than maybe you were brought up in the industry?
Ooh, that is such a great question. And I think the first part of it is just being okay with like being vulnerable and kind of calling yourself out. I like to call it, when I'm coaching teams, shout your failure. And I am the first one. Like if I mess up, I will be like, hey team, this was on me. I screwed this one up and this is what we've learned and this is how we're going to go forward. And really setting that up and demonstrating that it is okay to drop a ball, to have a slip up, as long as you own it and learn from it. And kind of creating that vulnerability, I think, in just the day-to-day job creates a more safe space for people to be able to say, hey, I need to step away. I'm having a rough time. Or this is what I need to do, in my day-to-day. This is the support I need to really feel like they can bring themselves to work in a genuine way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think inspiring your team and your peers is just like really important, but I think also showing up authentically is the most important, right? Like I don't know about you, Katie, but like I've had this in my career where I had like other CX leaders who have like, were not even CX leaders, just like my leaders, right? As I was like a manager or an associate or whatnot. And I was like coming up in the space and like there was always this very like, this is business and no personal, and there was no authenticity to it. And you can like smell bullshit from a mile away.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like you can smell bullshit. And so like, and I just remember like coming up in the industry for me, like I just was always like, I don't want to be like you, and I don't want to treat my peers or my team like that either. Like I want to show up really authentic and show that I'm a human and like you can be human too. Yeah. And listen, here's the thing, business is business and personal is personal. And that is always my boundary. And I will always say that, but you can still be a human to your teammates and to the people that you work with and still show up caringly.
Yep. Yeah, there's a way to show up and have your boundaries, but also be yourself and not compromise your values, compromise the way that you're showing up and bringing yourself to work. I had a manager very early in my career pull me aside once and say, hey, the leadership team probably won't take you seriously because you're really perky and you talk fast, and that makes you seem dumb. And looking back, I'm like, oh, somebody did not have my back. And I sat down with that and I was like, I get why you're saying this, but I'm not going to listen to this feedback because I don't want to change the way I speak and the enthusiasm that I bring to fit into a mold that is business or more professional. Like, I think that I can come in and be like really perky and excited and also be like, hey, I know what I'm doing. Here is the data. Here's my experience. Trust me for the job that you hired me to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so one more thing, like, God, this is like, all the like CX journey people, like whether you're an associate, whether you're a manager, a leader, an executive, like there's so much great value out of like this conversation that you can have, because this conversation isn't just about CX. This is about leading, and this leading your peers. So one of the things that I want to like dive into and what you said there though is the fact that like somebody didn't have your back. And when you have a leader who doesn't have your back, that is so tough, right? And again, like I get it, personal is personal, business is business, but there's a tactful way for you to help your associate, your peer, or whatever, like level up, right? Like I have actually a really similar story to that. I remember right after college, I didn't really like know what I wanted to do. Like I was floating. I like went to art school and I was like, I don't want anything to do with that when I was done, right?
Relatable.
And then became a personal assistant. And honestly, you guys, like, I was fucking terrible at it. Like, I was terrible at being a personal assistant. I was terrible at being an office manager. I'm not going to lie about it, okay? Like, I'm really good at, like, support, community building, digital experience. But my forte is not assistance. It is not, okay? Anyway, point is, okay, so that is like very valuable in those details of the story, because I remember having this boss and living in kind of like fear if I like messed up, right? And then this one day he like tells me, and I'm very junior, I'm like fresh out of college, so I'm very junior. And he's like, oh, you're really rough around the edges, and you're so rough around the edges that like we really have to soften those or you're never going to make it anywhere. So right now in this moment, I just want to be like, that's funny. That's funny, because my journey was just a little bit different, my guy.
Clearly you've made it nowhere.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not saying, oh my God, I'm so amazing. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like, it's really interesting that like this person that was leading me and supposed to be helping me like upskill myself, right? Like said this very like non-tact full thing to me that like honestly is a core memory that now I use as like my fuel to the fire. Okay.
And I think it's like, I personally, like one of the things that I think drew me to like being friends with you in the beginning, and I was like, Jess is so cool and she brings like her authentic self to interactions, and I don't feel like, like you're coming in and you're like, I'm gonna put myself in the business mold. And that authenticity, like fully I like met you and I was like, oh, we're friends now. It's happening because you bring it back to yourself.
My friends, let's switch gears a little bit, because, at the end of the day, Katie, you do work for a really dope company and I really want to talk about it.
Too.
So let's get into the juice. So listen, Glossier is a big real company, right? It's no longer like startup-y. And as a CX leader, what's the process like when you're integrating new tools into your CX department?
Ooh, that's a big question. And I think it's kind of something I'm always thinking about is, like, are there ways to do this better? I think in the world right now, like we are all trying to be the most efficient and the best at what we do. And a lot of that is figuring out like where do I put my people in and how do I give them the most time to do their best work? And what are the things that I can automate? What are the things that like there is a tool that has solved that? Because ultimately, like, I really hate the idea that like, oh, AI and tools are going to place people, because that's not it. And I would never want to do that. And I don't think anybody does. Like nobody wants to be like only chatbots forever.
Listen.
The worst. Truly, no, not at all.
Listen. I will reference this episode if you're listening to this one after, listen to the Eli from Yapo episode, because we talk a lot about AI, and like I'm about to get into AI with Katie here. But
I think AI absolutely has its time and place, and I think there are great uses for it. But I think you're not using it to replace people.
Yeah.
You're using it to take things off your people's plate so that they can actually do what their bread and butter is, what their superpower is. If you have somebody on your team who's really great at community building, but they're stuck in a queue, like dealing with returns, you're losing out, and your company is losing out on like having an amazing community builder do what they are passionate about, what they're amazing at.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, and that's the biggest hot take. Like last year, this year, AI is not coming for your job. Whether that's CX, that's marketing, copy, like all these other like things, right? AI is not coming from your job. What AI is going to do is help you level up yourself. So in this case about CX and automating things, I am a strong big believer of like chatbots and automating like very like tier 1 low level tasks. So you can then allow the opportunity for your support agents or even your community managers or your digital marketers, whoever it is that is under your CX team, to actually be able to like humanize an experience, have them to the time to like think through problem solving and be able to like put themselves in situations that maybe will like upskill them, and also put them in situations that will make a really dope experience for the external customer too. It really, AI is just helping the internal customer just be better, like straight up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's finding your efficiencies, and it's using those tools and figuring out how they can actually supplement your work versus take it away and do it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So given the number of customers you're dealing with every day, what data are you constantly analyzing, and where does that come from?
Ooh, okay. Honestly, it's not like numbersy data, but I go with my team's guts a lot.
Ooh, yeah.
Like I will sometimes have somebody come to me and say, I am seeing these numbers. What is happening with the numbers? And the first thing I will do is go to my team who is in the queues and be like, hey, what are you seeing? What's your take? Is this going up? Is this going down? Like, what do you think is happening? And if I can take those two things and put them together, these are the numbers, and then this is the anecdotal, that is the strongest case that I can make to then say, here's the recommendation. Here's a change we need to make. Here's where we need to resource. And I think that's something I had to learn early in my career. I was like, I don't like data. I go with feelings. I'm in customer service. I'm going to use feelings. And you can't be all data, but you can't be all feelings. If you can take a quote from a customer that's really evocative and then put it with numbers, that is the strongest way to really advocate for your people, is say like, here is the data. Here's what the people are saying. Let's do this thing.
No, absolutely. So I think what's really interesting, and again, this kind of goes back to AI too, but I think what's really interesting is that as CX professionals or people who are like junior level, working their way up to manager, whatever, it's so interesting that like a lot of us are just not data driven. Like we really come from like an empathetic place and like trusting our gut. But then at some point in your career, you have to shift and you have to start utilizing data. Like a CX manager who I love dearly, and like I'm super stoked for like him to like be leveled up and all these things, because one of the biggest things that I taught him when I like first started working with him was, he was like, you know, trusting his gut a lot, or would be like, oh, you know, like I think this is right. I think this is like right. But I'm always like, where's the data? Where's the data? Where's the data? And so one of the things that I build for like every CX team is like a very scrappy dashboard utilizing like Google Sheets or Excel, right? Like there's like some queries in it and, you know, formulas and stuff. And I take a lot of the data and then like create like graphs and all these other things, right? It seems very more complex, but it truly is not. And the reason it's important, I'm going to land this plane, I promise you. Is that with the CX manager and like showing him that like, hey, like, yeah, you're downloading like the amount of tickets you're getting or the tags or this or that and all these other things. And then you're putting it into this dash and then viewing it from like a data driven point of view rather than like, oh, I think we're having this type of ticket, or I think we're doing these things, literally shifted the way he was thinking. So like, and now I'm super proud of him, because it's so interesting to watch this. He's shifted into data driven. Like now when there's a problem, he's like, well, let me see how many of the tickets that I have. Okay, maybe that's not as big of a problem as I thought it was. You know,
beautiful. I'm obsessed with it. And I love the idea. I love that he was using the word I think, and he has stopped using that, because I think the data can actually make you more confident, because you can say, this is my gut instinct. Does the data back it up? Oh, it does. Oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm great. And I think especially early in your career, like that's so much is being confident in that you know what you're talking about. And by using that data and backing yourself up, it's a great way to build that confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because like, so the other side of it too, and I think this is really important, like no matter what level you're in and you're looking at like your CX team or community team, is that you have to have data to support everything, right? And not only do you have to like have data within the platforms itself, you also need to be able to like take that information and create an executive review, right? That's how you, like, I wouldn't say that's the only way you get the seat at the table, but if you come to the table with data and like proof in the pudding in a way, you're more likely to get the buy-in about needing the help or needing the tool or whatever it is. Like you can't just come to the table with like, I think. You have to come to the table with some sort of feedback loop, some sort of data about the problem that you're trying to solve.
And then on the inverse, you can't just like put graphs down and be like, here is data, interpret it. I was talking to a friend who's a CX leader recently who is working in a department now with somebody who's never worked in CX. And this person said, hey, can you just like tell me what a CX leader does? And one of the things that she was talking about was like KPIs and data. And I was talking to her and I said, don't forget to say that one of the things that you do is interpret that data and figure out the storytelling of it and then make recommendations, because that's why you're there, is you're the one who can take that data and then make it in to the recommendations and to the next steps as a CX leader. Like that's why you're in your job.
How do you at Glossier use data to personalize your CX and retention strategy?
Something that I love about Glossier is that, and I've never had this before, is that people really like the CX team as people. Like the CX team has fans, and I love that so much.
I love that.
And we have seen in the past that people will like DM us and ask for specific people, or like on chat will ask us to talk to specific people. And as we started seeing that coming in, we were like, oh, this is like part of it. This is like having people sign their names. In a DM versus like the company personalizes it. Having people put like photos in, their like help desk picture, it's like, oh, it's a person. And as we started seeing, that roll in and started kind of making those changes to really personalize it, if the agents are comfortable, again, we want psychological safety, but we saw people start to like have longer conversations. And like really specifically, we have a really like a vibrant online community on like Twitter and Reddit and things like that. And people will call out specific agents that they spoke to and be like, I DM'd Glossier today and so-and-so gave me an amazing recommendation, and like we'll screenshot it. And I like to send people tweets and I'll be like, hey, you made Twitter, great job. You did it.
That.
And just like seeing how that really creates that relationship, which I think continues to make customers come back, because it's not just, it's a brand, but it's not just a brand. It's people, and it's people who are meeting you where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's people who are meeting you where you're at. I think it's like, this is exactly what we're talking about, right? Like you can utilize AI chatbots to like automate the low level stuff, but this is what it means when you get to the higher level stuff, right? Like you're personalizing that experience with the human, right? Because the agent has more time to call the person, Katie, Jess, whatever, and make the time to actually make a recommendation to them, right? So then that experience just becomes that much doper, right? I will say the only thing that like freaks me out is like I don't like when my real names of my agents or their pictures are and that's just because like, and I worked at also a huge brand as well, right? Like for Feastables, like 1000%, I was like, we ain't gonna be real here, okay? You're a real human behind this, but your name is no longer Alex, it's Jerry.
We have that as one of like the safety measures, because that's something I think about a lot, is like safety for my team, is that if you would like to use a work alias, you use that work alias. And we encourage people to put, pronouns in their signature. If that's not something you're comfortable with, that's cool. Because I want them to be people, but I also don't want anybody to be like, I am unsafe.
Okay, yeah. So I think with personalization, it's really hard. Like, I wouldn't say it's really hard. Just like balance it. That's all I'm saying. Just balance it. Maybe Alex wants to be Jerry. Maybe Alex doesn't want his photo online, and that's okay. Like, don't force it, right? I think you can't force your agents to put out their real persona. I think that's really important. So that's all I'm saying with that.
I'm going to +1 that 100 times.
Yeah, +1. Okay, so I kind of want to get into the juice of Omnichannel because Glossier has
We love Omnichannel.
We love Omnichannel so much. Okay, so listen. I think you guys have a really deep and complex brand experience, which is really dope, really awesome, really love it. But, you know, you have your own brick and mortar. You're also available in Sephora. You're also available on your own site. Are you on Amazon?
We are not on Amazon.
Oh, okay, good. I love that.
Don't buy Glossier on Amazon. It's resellers.
Yeah, don't do that. Okay. So how do you create an omnichannel customer experience?
I have to give the biggest shout out to our trading team. There is one person on our trading team who is in charge of creating the training for wholesale, for e-com, and for retail.
Wow.
And because there's one person owning that, who also like truly is doing 500 jobs, and I bow down to her, but it's a consistent experience, the way we speak to products, the way we speak to the customer experience, and really like finding those touch points of like, we are all going to talk about this way. Something else that I really value is we have a lot of cross-functional communication between channels. So I have a regular meeting with some of our wholesale team to be like, what's happening in Sephora right now? Oh, are we seeing that reflected online? We'll talk to the retail teams and be like, oh, we released a product today. People on e-com haven't gotten it yet because they ordered it online, but people in the store are touching it, playing with it, trying it on. What are they saying? Because that will affect, that's going to be what my customers are saying on e-com. So I should prep for that as well. So that feedback loop between all the channels, like you really can't silo them. They have to talk all the time and share information.
Dude, dog. Like straight up when we were talking about an omnichannel customer experience, I see this so often in brands. And I know this doesn't necessarily relate to B2B, but hey, maybe B2B, you'll get some sort of enablement ideas out of this, right? Like shout out to Bridge. Bridge is a QR company that like really helps bridge the gap between retail to D2C. But my point is though, is that, you know, I see this a lot with brands like omnichannel brands. It's like you get so excited and you go into retail or you like do your brick and mortar store and then you completely forget what happens in e-com. And you completely forget that it's not necessarily what happens in e-com, but like in order to create the loop of like retail or your brick and mortar back into e-com, you need to understand what's happening on the shelf in retail. And I think it's really, 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 really hard. And especially even if you don't have like your own store, maybe you're in Walmart and your Target and you can't control that experience, right? But you really like, as you go into retail and you do these things, you really got to think about, okay, well, how am I going to bridge the gap once I get into there? Even though I'm really excited about it, how am I going to bridge the gap for the customer experience? Because what will happen if you don't, then it becomes siloed. It becomes siloed, like you're having this own experience, even if you're in Walmart, Target, like all these places, and then you're having a different experience in e-com. But like ultimately, you want to loop people back to your e-com website because that's where you're going to grow the brand loyalty. So what's really important, and I think Glossier has really figured this out, is that it comes down to the training. I think it comes down to having a very tight feedback loop amongst all of these channels. And then like that's what's constantly feeding the machine. I'm sure you run into things that are like that maybe like don't make sense and maybe you need to pivot and like change them. But I think you have the ultimate pillar.
Yeah, it's ultimately one team, one dream. Like we are all doing the same thing and we are all talking about these products and educating about them. So if we're all coming at it from different angles, it's going to be confusing for the customer. It's going to be confusing for people looking at the brand, especially people being introduced to the brand for the first time. Because ultimately, they're going to think about the brand. They're not going to think about Sephora. Like, oh, I had a bad experience at Sephora. It's going to be, I had a bad experience with this brand. It is the brand's accountability. So really making sure that, you know, that conversation is happening. Something that I love that we do is when we have a big training about a new product, our e-com CX team will go to the stores and train on the floor with the store team. So everybody's talking about the product together and learning about it together so that we're all coming at it from the same place.
Yeah. I think that's really amazing. I mean, granted, like for anybody listening and that's thinking about like omnichannel experience, right? I will say that like Glossier, like, yes, has the ultimate pillar. I think Glossier should be like the North Star for sure. You don't think you can always control these things in like Target and Walmart, but what you can do is you can work with those companies as much as you possibly can for like a training aspect. Or what you could also do is like think about the packaging that you have on shelf and possibly put in a QR code, or maybe it's a shelf talker that has like aisle on it, right? Like how do you just loop them back to your own experience and try to control that environment as much as possible?
Yeah.
So Sephora is really interesting as a platform too, right? And I actually just quickly want to ask you, how does CX support work for Sephora? Like what happens? Like do you have customers that sometimes come to you, and then what do you do with that?
We do, yeah. We have customers that come to us and be like, I bought this in Sephora. And we really see ourselves as kind of the education component of that. So if they come to us and they say, I bought it in Sephora and I'm confused about the packaging or the formula, or is this the right product? Did I buy the right product? We want to make sure that we can be that touch point and be like, okay, cool, let's give you the background of this product, of the brand. Let's be that educational source. Also empower the Sephora beauty advisors to have that as well. I had a member of my team who was going into our UK Sephora once a week for one of our quarters, and actually just with the beauty advisor team and talking to customers in the store and being like, hey, I'm from Glossier. Like, what questions do you have? How can I help you as a touch point for the brand in this space that is our wholesale space? And then also encourage customers, like, if you have questions, you can come to our Instagram, even if you didn't buy it from our e-com site or our retail store. If you have a Glossier product, DM us. Like, that's what we're here for, is to answer your questions. And I think social media is such a great opportunity for that education, no matter where people are getting your product. If you're D2C, using your social media as an education platform and an open forum of like, hey, what questions do you have?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's and I actually really want to get into the Glossier community because I think this is really important to talk about. But what I see a lot of times, and this is like both B2B and B2C, like straight up, okay? I think what's really interesting, and I posted about this on LinkedIn, that you have your support and then you have your community, right? But a lot of times the community sits on the social team or a marketing team, and it's kind of away from support. And I'm not saying like, oh my God, like they have to be house and they have to be absolutely together. But I think that those teams have to really work closely, because here's the thing. You might have your product reviews or your NPS surveys or whatever surveys, and you're outwardly asking your customer for information. But if like Karen in Lafayette, Indiana doesn't like your product, straight up, or in not just product, feature as well, like if you're SaaS, straight up, Karen ain't coming to you, okay? You know where she's going? She's going on the Facebook forum.
Yep.
She's going on Twitter, and she's going to tweet about it. She's going to write about it and like do the jams about it. And then if you have nobody monitoring that channel, like, what are you doing about it? Like, right, like you have like this problem that could like snowball. So what I think, yes, that's a complaint avenue, right? But I think that there should be a level of community that understands customer support and not just necessarily handing it off to the customer support team. I think that community managers should be very well versed and trained in customer support as a whole. And I also think that those teams, like whether it's like the same team or different team or however it is that works in your organization, those teams should be working hand in hand, because at the end of the day, in CX, support, you're literally a level of building community.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That was just like a hot take. I'm going to be real with you.
It was a great hot take. And I think like when I'm looking at brands and I always go to their social page. I'm a millennial. I'm like, I'm going to check this brand's Instagram. Yeah. If I see them engaging and answering CX questions in their comments, I automatically trust the brand more, because I'm like, oh, they're responsive. They're willing to, answer questions or respond to criticism. It's not just like, well, the comments are a free for all and nobody knows how to answer them. Oh, well.
Well, I think you hit a good point. Like, and I run into this a lot with like a lot of like support organizations of like, should I respond to the ad comments? Yeah. You should be responding to the ad comments. Yeah, I get it. Like, there's a little controversy about hiding them or not, whatever. At Feastables, we honestly responded to every single comment we could. Like, I mean, it was a little bit crazy and a little bit manual. We'll get into that later. But this actually brings up a really good point. So Glossier community is so strong, right? Like, you've even had ad campaigns about the Glossier community. And I think that, and again, I think a lot of brands want to replicate this, but I've spoken a lot about like what the things that I think, but like, how has Glossier, in your words, created that strong community? And like, what is CX's involvement in that?
Ooh, okay. CX is really involved, I think, in the online community creation and moderation. We are the ones, the digital team, which we call the G team, are the ones who are responding to all the comments on social, who are answering DMs. It's not separate things like email support and chat and social are not separate things. It's all one team that's responding. We also have such an amazing feedback loop with our social and communications team. We have a weekly meeting where we talk about what's coming up in the social world. Like, what are we posting? What are we asking? Like, is the social team going to ask a question about like, hey, what's your favorite color of lipstick? Cool. We know that. We can look out and we can continue to have that conversation and really prompt it and meet those people and say, oh, okay, cool. Now we have the insights. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
I also think like I love Glossier community so much. I was a Glossier fan before I worked there and we have the best customers in the world. I'm going to say it. I'm a hot take. Best customers in the world. They will just reach out just to talk to us.
Yeah.
Like we get wedding invites. We get invites to people's graduations. People will tell us like their Glossier story. I had an amazing customer who reached out once before we relaunched our solid perfume. And she just literally wrote in to be like, I love this perfume so much. I wore it on my first date with my husband. We're getting married next week. I just wanted to let you know how important it was. And we knew we were relaunching the solid perfume. And so I got with our team and I said, hey, can we get this to her? Like, right when it launches, because her wedding was like the weekend of the launch. Yeah. And so we got it to her and we sent it to her. We said, hey, we're sending it to you. Like, we love that we're a part of your special day. And 6 months later, she sent us her wedding photos and the perfume was in the photo of like her dress and her shoes. Cute. And she sent us a little thank you note and like the photo of how it meant so much to her. And I think with beauty especially, it's such a personal thing and you're so involved in like people's lives and their routines and how they take care of themselves. That I think you always have to have that in the front of your mind of like, this is a lipstick, but the lipstick is also kind of like maybe helping somebody's mental health, maybe helping them figure out their identity. And I think that that's so special. And you also have to keep that in mind.
Switching gears slightly, because I want to talk about retention. We talked a lot about like support and the community, but I really want to understand what does retention look like at Glossier? I know there's loyalty programs, but like, how are you thinking about it? How are you measuring it? Like, what are you guys doing?
One of the things that I really love that we do is that we ask our community questions. I think that something we talk about like on the business side is like, oh, if you're going to do an initiative, you need to get buy-in. And we get buy-in from our community. And I think Glossier was really founded online with Into the Gloss and asking questions on like, what's your dream cleanser look like? Okay, cool. We're going to make it. And we do that and we continue to do that is like, hey, we're thinking about coming out with new lipstick colors. Which of these two do you like? Vote on it. You know, like that's going to influence the decision we make. And, you know, we're always looking at the comments and people are saying like, oh man, I wish you had a brown mascara. I wish you had a brown mascara for so long. We made a brown mascara and we got to say, hey, that thing that you asked for, we have done it. And we saw people who were like, oh, I DM'd this. I did this. And there's that great relationship with a brand of like, oh, I am actually contributing to what is being created, to the product development. And I think that really creates this idea of loyalty and kind of like a personalization of the brand.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think we've like been hitting on that for like so much of like the conversation, but like you're right. I think the theme is like absolutely loyalty, and because that personalization, like it's like Glossier, I think has really become, I think it's like a brand that is like going to be around for a long time. It's like the L'Oreal. It's, you know, it's the MAC.
Hearing the way that I think the teams talk about it and how excited people get about the products. And I've worked at brands before where like, it's not cool to like the products. And that always makes me a little bit sad. It's like, oh, you ordered the product? Lame.
What?
And people at Glossier love Glossier. And I just get so excited to be like, oh my God, are you wearing that lipstick? I'm wearing that lipstick too. And we just get excited about it because we really like the product.
Yeah.
And I think that that's evident in the way that we talk about it in the products that we make.
Yeah. I think that that's really important. And the one thing that we like, this is basically what we've been talking about this whole time. Good CX actually starts from within. It starts from within. It is the culture of the business. It's what's happening internally that then can deliver externally and give a good customer experience and overall brand experience. And I think that Glossier is like really good at this, right? And like even like for myself, like that's literally the pillar of how I build every single one of my CX teams. Like Feastables, the same thing, right? Like here, I just want to give an additional example, but like I came onto Feastables. I was employee 4. We didn't even have a customer the day I started. We didn't have customers for like 4-6 months later, right? But what it was I was employee 4. We said customer experience is going to be at the core of this business, right? So one of my missions was every person that came in, then honestly became the people experience person. I'm not going to lie. Like, it was a joke that I was like the HR person, which I'd be a terrible HR person straight up. But okay, because I curse too much, not because I'm like not because I'm a bad human. Okay,
all my HR advice from now on.
Yeah. Okay, but so the reason I'm like bringing all these things up though is because the culture for your CX starts from within, right? And so, everything that like I was doing and building that program was training the marketing team, was training the supply chain team, and was training like the strategy team. I remember like one of my dearest friends, it was like she started on the strategy team, and the first day I was in like our tiny WeWork office in Chicago, and I turn around, shout out, this is for you, Laura. And I was like, Laura, how are you going to help me with the CX? And she helped me develop out that dashboard that I was like talking about. But like, it's so important that it's like a good brand experience and customer experience starts within. And I think it like starts at every level of the company. So like, that's the story with Vistools, but I very much, everything that you've said, Katie, like about Glossier and everything that it is that you're doing, like, every piece of the business is so focused on that customer experience, and that's what makes a really dope experience.
Yeah.
And it's commendable.
I love that basically everybody who works at the brand is also a customer of the brand.
Yeah.
And it is very cool to be like, I am a fan and I get to make the thing that I want to see. Yeah. How cool is that?
Yeah.
Like, I still, I've been there for over 3 years now, and I still wake up and I'm like, my job's really cool.
Yeah.
And I think it's really special to, after 3 years, still think your job is cool. Yeah. And I tell everybody who, we have a great program. If you're a new employee, you get kind of paired with like a buddy for your first month, usually at a different team, to just be like, hey, what's going on at the company? And everybody that I have been paired with, I've been like, listen, everybody is so kind and so nice. And you might think, when's the other shoe gonna drop? Like, what's wrong? What's the problem? What's gonna be the thing? And everybody is just that kind and nice and good at their job.
That's culture hires, man.
Yeah.
That's a really good culture hires. I won't get into people experience because we all know I'm terrible at HR. So I have some hot takes. I have some random questions for you.
Love a hot take.
And these are a little bit about Glossier, and I know we talked about it, but like, what's your favorite Glossier product?
Okay, it changes all the time. I think right now, in this moment, Afterbalm is I don't know why people are not talking about this moisturizer. It's so good. I
need moisturizer.
Anytime that I have any like dryness, reactive skin, like eczema, dry cuticles, dry elbows, like it is so good. And we came out with a mini version over the holidays that's like this tiny little like travel size version. And I was actually in Philly just for funsies, and I stopped by our Philly store, and they were like, do you want a little Afterbalm while you're here because you're traveling? And I was like, I do want a little Afterbalm. Like, I have the big one. I also need the little one because I love it that much.
Yeah.
It's so good.
God, I need that travel bomb.
It's very good. Listen,
Glossier is actually down the street, and I think we're going to go to it.
Oh, we're absolutely going to go to it. We're going to go.
All right. So, this one's going to be tough for like your brick and mortar people, because LA, Philly, and New York might get a little upset. But what's your favorite Glossier store?
You're like asking me to choose between my children?
I know.
The first store I actually worked at was the Philly store. So I have to say the Philly store. They were so wonderful and welcoming. And when I went there and I, spent a couple of days working on the floor, and I was so afraid to do like the back of house, like picking and packing orders. And they were so great and encouraging. And they were like, it's scary, but you can do it. And I had the little thing to scan the products, and I was like, this is the scariest thing I've ever done, because what if I mess it up? And the team was amazing, and it's such a beautiful store. There's like this beautiful like ramp that you go up, and I think all of our stores are so really nicely aesthetically designed that it's just nice to walk into them. But shout out to the Philly team.
All right, I love Philly, so I've never been there, but I'm picking that store too.
There you go.
All right. So switching gears back to CX just specifically, what's something in CX that has a lot of red tape that you wish didn't?
QA.
Ooh, yeah.
Like, it's so important to, I think, to consistently do QA. And there's not a good way to do it that isn't like, I'm going to like copy paste this ticket and then I'm going to put it over here. And even if you're using some sort of system or program, like there's never a good way to like integrate it, and it takes so much time. And I need somebody to figure out a beautiful, perfect QA resolution for me.
There's no good QA resolution.
There's no tool that is perfect yet.
Yeah, and like don't come at me and say like, oh, but my tool's so great. Listen, I mean, It could very well be. Okay. But listen, like, can we just like have a CX roundtable to talk about this subject? Like, because it's like
we have notes.
Everybody's trying to solve for it, but it's like never what you need it to do.
No.
There's AI advancements. I'm sure there's somebody out there listening to this that's going to do something, but you know.
When you do it, Jess and I will give you notes.
Yeah.
Done. Call us.
Okay. Hot take. Do you think that the retention and CX playbook is ever fully solved?
No. Literally never. Mm-hmm. I think that if you ever say that I've solved it, that's when you should step away and like not be doing it, because there's always time to iterate. There's always other things you can do. And even if it feels like right now everything is solved, I think the technology, the industry, the people are always changing. I mean, the pandemic, like you could have had a perfect CX retention experience and then the pandemic happened and it changed your entire industry. Yeah. And then you've got to iterate. So I don't think it's ever solved. I don't think you've ever perfected it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I absolutely agree. And I also think it varies by audience. It varies by industry, right? Yeah. Like you can have your core pillars, but like at the end of the day, like one pillar might not work for the other.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So last question, and then I'm actually going to do something else.
Ooh.
What's the best advice you never received?
Ooh. Don't be afraid to be weird.
Ugh. Amen, girl.
Like, I am a self-proclaimed weirdo. I have a possum tattoo. Like, come on, I'm a weirdo. And every single company I started working at, I was like, I gotta see how long before I could like let my weirdo out. Like my husband and I had a joke where he's like, how long do you think it'll take before you like get weird? And we would make a bet every time I started a new company. And just like be that they hired you because of you as a person, like something that you brought to the interview and something about your personality, your experience is the reason that they brought you in. Do not feel like you need to like take your like passions and your excitements and put them in a box and hide them and not bring them with you.
Amen, girl.
Be a weirdo.
Be a weirdo. Be authentic. Be your real self. Like, I know we were told this as children, or we've been all told this many times, but it's like, life is like honestly too short to not just be who you are.
Just do it.
That's it.
You're going to be so much happier and everybody around you is going to be so much happier.
I know. Absolutely. Well, thank you for tuning in to The Juice. And Katie, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. This was delightful.
Where can all the friends find you?
You can find me on the Instagrams at Katie Brunel Brotman. You can find me at my newsletter, which is going to come back. It's themillennialmanager.substack.com. Sign up. I talk a lot about being a millennial and being a people manager and mental health in the startup world.
Yes.
I think that's it.
Yes. Sign up for her newsletter. We'll put it in the show notes and we'll link it everywhere. And I will see you guys and hear you guys, or you hear me next week. Thank you. Hey, wow, you made it to the end of the episode. That means that you like me and I like you, which also means you should subscribe to this show.